talk about two things. Your path to the Dhamma and what it's meant to you. And it's a very broad question, but I find it's a powerful opportunity to get to know each other, and it's just been deeply inspirational and moving each time we've done it. So basically I'll just leave the space open. If someone would be willing to volunteer a pad and a cushion for the people speaking, that would be helpful.
This makes me nervous. Yeah, ever since I knew that we were doing these community stories, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to go up there someday and talk. And I waited until the last day that I was gonna be here so that, I could just run out the door and you guys would never have to see me again. No, hopefully you get to see me again, but I don't know how long I'll be gone. For those that don't know, I've been building out a 15-foot U-Haul, not a U-Haul anymore, but it used to be a U-Haul truck, and it's converted. Still needs a lot of work, still has a lot of mechanical issues. One of the spark plugs just blew out of it a couple days ago, so yeah, I get to figure that out and might delay my travels by a couple days, but I'm still leaving this week, or this following week nonetheless, and headed to Abhayagiri Monastery June 1st to June 11th. So I'm very excited for that. And then Karuna Buddhist Vihara as well for a few days after that. And then it's pretty open-ended, so kind of scary, very scary actually, especially because my truck might blow out more spark plugs, who knows? Apparently that's a thing with these, but so yeah, that's where I'm at right now. But as far as where I started on my Dhamma journey, I think like many of us, it started with suffering, lots of suffering. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how much to go into that. I'll try to give just a broad picture, you know. Growing up, I didn't really, as a kid, no kid knows what depression is really, but since then, since having read about it as an adult, I've come to know that children who are bored all the time are probably depressed. So I was always one of those kids who's just like flopping all around, like, I'm bored, what should I do? And my parents would just be like, go play outside, go read a book, do whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. And as a kid, I was just like that all the time, not wanting to do anything, being bored all the time. And that's kind of carried into, my later childhood and adulthood as well. I think they keep changing the name on it. It used to be called dysthymia, and then they changed it to chronic mild depression or something like that. But yeah, that's that. And it's been a struggle. And oftentimes the way that my habits have tried to compensate for that is by being wild and crazy and being kind of a silly fun boy. And what made it even more difficult is that kind of worked for a little bit. Like in high school, I was one of those people that was just unbelievably vulgar. Like that was my thing, and it worked. People would laugh, and it was kind of how I got laughs from people. And then I got to college and realized that's not okay. That people, some people still appreciated it, but some people were like, yeah, you can't say that. So, in the yearbook superlatives, I would best this, best that, I was voted most unique. So that kind of shows you how obsessed I was with being special, and still am, honestly. And then I was also voted most likely to become an evil dictator. So I think somebody who was on the yearbook committee told me that that's supposed to be the biggest jerk category, but they couldn't call it that. So they said it was supposed to be something else even worse than biggest jerk, but that's kind of the PC version of it. But they couldn't call it that, so they called it most likely to become an evil dictator. So there's a photo of me holding like a pitchfork in the yearbook, and along with the other girl who was kind of known for being argumentative, much like I was, so and still am to some extent. So just kind of gives you an idea of what I'm working with here. But years went by. In college, I started meditating with like YouTube videos and blogs and whatnot. Very shallow, but nice. It's a start, And I had heard about the Goenka silent meditation retreats back when I was 20, still in college, but I didn't take one for like 6 years. I don't know why. I think it was probably the excuse that most people have of like, where am I going to find 10 days plus 2, so 12 days really of free time to take a retreat? And took me 6 years, but after 6 years of graduating from college, doing search engine optimization, which is like marketing to get websites, hiring Google, and realizing that that was really soul-sucking and boring, and not necessarily the field itself, but just working for an agency where you're working for clients who just have enough money to pay you, which are usually either amoral or immoral companies, like some short-term lending clients charging 500% APR on a $100 loan or something. Not great people to work with. And then also the industry is very like heavy on partying and drinking and stuff like that. So after doing that for a while and getting burnt out more and more, I was living in San Diego, burnt out on SEO, and realized I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to live and travel in a van. And I've kind of had that since 2016 or so. I was thinking about doing that. And then I also remembered, there was that meditation retreat that I heard of like 6 years ago. I am quitting my career. I'm moving back to Washington, and I have all this free time. Why don't I do that? So I did that, took one of the Goenka retreats, and I almost sort of understood it to some extent on the first course, but it wasn't enough, and I just was like, I need to take a second course right now. Like, how can I do that? And so I told the center, I was like, I'm desperate, I need a second course. And they're like, well, you can sign up for one. I'm like, but that's in like 3 or 4 months, because they book up pretty quickly. You have to sign up several months in advance. And they ended up allowing me to do one cycle of long-term service where you serve 2 courses, and then, which is lovely, and then you get to sit a course. So I volunteered for 2 courses, and I sat my second course, and long story short there, I understood to some extent, not like, to the transcendent extent, but I felt like I, at that point, could take the meditation home with me. And then I went home, tried to do, what he suggests of an hour in the morning, hour in the evening, did that for maybe 2 weeks, and then kind of fell apart. And it's been hard to really find a structured rhythm of meditation at home for a long time. I did eventually do 7 more months at the Goenka Center, which was very impactful, but at some point I knew I needed more, and I knew that stemmed from the Theravada teachings. So I wanted to get more into that, but there wasn't really a community here in Seattle that I knew of. I think there were small ones here and there, but not ones that I knew of. I feel like I'm meandering a bit here, but essentially the short story for the next couple years or so was I did some landscaping just to make some money and get my hands dirty and learn some skills, quit that, and then that's actually when I did the 7 months at the Goenka Center, quit that, moved to Taiwan, taught English, quit that, and that was to explore teaching, to see if there was really something that could like keep me I don't know, in the working world, because I always wanted to be a teacher, and I decided I couldn't deal with probably the administration of it. So this whole time, I knew that I felt like monasticism was like the highest path that somebody could take, but I've been fighting it tooth and nail. Is that the word? Claw and nail? Yeah, something like that. Just really like, maybe I could do this and I'll be happy. Maybe I could do this and I'll be happy. So that was me exploring teaching when I was in Taiwan. Didn't work. And then moved back here, COVID hit, and was living with some friends that were sort of more into like the Western style of self-improvement, but very like non-Buddhist. A lot of drinking, lots of partying, and then lots of talk about self-improvement. And it just wasn't resonating, wasn't working. I still felt like I was kind of stuck. And I wasn't taking the precepts at that time either. Eventually, this little group called Clear Mountain Monastery appeared. I had signed up for an email list, and that email list sent out a bit about Clear Mountain at Magnuson Park, and so I went to that. And I realized when I was there that a lot of these people that I'm surrounded by have probably taken on the 5 precepts, and I still hadn't. And so I just thought to myself, like, why am I still waiting? Because I knew that I would take them on at some point, but I kept putting it off. It's weird. Weird that that's the part that I start to cry at. Excuse me. It's really hard to talk when you're choked up. I feel like I could probably sit here for like 10 minutes and just not talk and let that pass, but closing my eyes helps. Yeah, so from that day, I took the 5 precepts, held them pretty well. Yeah, you know, there's ones that are harder than others to keep, but I have undertaken the practice to observe the 5 precepts, I'll put it that way. And it's made a big difference. This community has made a big difference.
I'm happy to sit with you for 10 minutes, Miles. It's a meditation group. That's what we do.
So I'm not quite sure what to say. Part of me wonders if my truck is falling apart to be like, what are you doing? You're already where you're supposed to be. But I also know that that I need to explore renouncing more.
Metta for you, Miles.
Thank you.
Lots of metta.
Miles, can I take a moment to bless your trip as a group?
Sure. Yeah.
So if everyone just raise their hands in Anjali, and if anyone has a word to say for Miles and what they hope for him for these next few months, wherever he goes, then you can say it.
Just kindness for you.
Thanks.
Liberation. Peace.
Ease.
It's a perfect talk, Miles.
Was.
Silence. Community. A glimpse of not-self. We love you, Miles.
You've been the quiet pivot point for a lot of this whole project from day one, and you've been through it, and this kind of was the perfect talk, actually. And we all signed a card for you, so we'll give it to you as you leave. You can also say anything you want to say, but you said something quite important already.
I'll try to wrap it up with a pretty bow at least. Thank you. That was really sweet. Got me out of my head and body a little. Well, hopefully in my body, but out of my head a little bit. Yeah. This community has been really impactful. I hope that it continues to grow, that people continue to support it, and help build out the structures for it. We've been working on kind of setting up some structures so people can get more involved if they're inclined. And I look forward to coming back someday to maybe a physical location for the monastery. Big ol' sala meditation hall. That'd be great. Did I use that word right? Is that what a sala is? Okay, yeah. Just making sure. I know there's still all these words that I don't know, so. I don't know what else there is to say other than thank you to everybody, Anumodana, and love you guys.
Say sadhu a few times. Sadhu, 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 Anumodana.
You can do that.
Okay.
Please stand. put mine before you go. These two? Yeah.
And is this going to already be on?
Check. If it's like,
Is this on?
No, so hold it. Yeah, that should do it.
Is that on now?
In a second. There you go.
Testing? Okay, great. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not used to speaking to lots of people, and I also had a little too much coffee this morning. I remember this moment as a child, maybe 11 years old, at my home in the springtime. Been cooped up all winter, not so much going outside, play indoors and stuff. And there was this beautiful sunny day. The birds are singing, the flowers are blooming, the air is bright and fresh, and I was outside in just this blissful mood, just this lovely, lovely day, finally out, and I had this thought, like, this is going to end. Tomorrow I'm not going to feel like this, or I might not feel like this, And it didn't ruin the mood, but it kind of, it was a notable experience and a notable memory, because it's been so long that I've weighed my satisfaction with my life and my happiness in general, and in terms of the pleasant and the unpleasant. And I think that may have been the first point that I realized that my idea of what happiness was a little bit off balance. I thought that, if I'm in the right external circumstances, then I'll be happy. And this feeling of bliss, this is the ideal, this is the happiness that I'm going to look for. And I think that's brought me a lot of pain. I know dukkha has several different translations. It can be translated as suffering, and it can also be translated as unsatisfactoriness. And I know maybe some of this is the difference between the noble truth of dukkha and dukkha as like one of the marks of existence, one of the kind of innate qualities of the natural world. But I've just been looking at the idea that I'm not going to find satisfaction if I keep looking for it in those places. And I've spent so long doing that. So, growing up and just being really unhappy, looking for satisfaction in, whether or not my parents liked me, or whether or not the people at school wanted to be around me, whether or not I got good grades, and, thinking I'm going to be happy if I can do this, and then inevitably just falling short. And not always falling short. I mean, there have been plenty of good moments. And more as I practice, I keep finding that there are better and better places for me to look to for happiness, if that makes sense. At first it went from, being in college and a really unhappy time for me, and saying,
I'll find happiness in my work. I'm going to study hard and be a good student, and that's a better place to put your happiness than, say, partying or whatever you might be doing. And I said, okay, this isn't where happiness is, and just waffled to the next thing. Okay, I'm gonna find my happiness in hiking, and that's not an unwholesome thing to do, I don't think. But I saw this kind of phenomena happening where at first I'd go on these short little hikes and it'd be like beautiful and satisfactory, and then soon enough I'd go on a fancier hike with something prettier, and the first one wasn't going to cut it for me anymore. It's like, oh, okay, this is another one of those things where it's two sides of the same coin. Back to that childhood memory, knowing like this happiness, as long as I'm putting my attention on it and weighing that as the way I measure my satisfaction with life, that's not gonna be what I need. And it's two sides of the same coin, because inevitably if I'm holding on to that, and if I'm looking for that, I'm inherently tied to the other side of the coin. And yeah, that's, I'm not entirely sure that I know that I haven't found the alternative to that yet. But I'm finding that Buddhism and this community here is one of the first times that I've felt that I'm looking to something that is going to hold more satisfaction for me. In 2020, when COVID hit, I quit my staff job. I was a nurse, and I started traveling for work, taking 3-month contracts, and that led me. I happened to take a job in Washington, and I happened to visit Pacific Hermitage because I had been reading a textbook about Buddhism. I was always drawn to Buddhism. I didn't know why. I think that, maybe that could be past karma, or it could be that, the idea of Buddhism is something of peace and tranquility. But I felt drawn to it. I felt curious about it, and I had left Christianity. I was a Christian before. And so I had all these doubts, and I visited Pacific Hermitage and met Ajahn Chunda and Tanjino and Tan Dhammawaro. And they gave me a book. They gave me Stillness Flowing, and I read it over the next 3 weeks, just like it was my salvation. It was the best thing I'd ever read. It made the most sense. And there was this quote. Well, I'll save that for a moment. But I had a lot of doubts about Buddhism. I thought, well, I don't believe in God anymore. Buddhists, they talk about, rebirth. How can I believe that that's true? There's no evidence, etc. Just being really up in my head about that. I had a lot of doubt. And when I read Stillness Flowing, there's a quote from Ajahn Chah. No matter how much suffering and difficulty I have to endure, I will persevere. Otherwise, there will be no end to my doubts. And this quote, to put it in a little context, was also about how, we keep listening to what other people are telling us, and we never really find out the truth. But look at what you're doing right now. Don't look elsewhere. And I had never thought before that doubt was a mind state, and that it wasn't an intellectual skepticism or a healthy thing. I had never realized, and it turned my world upside down. And it was so true I dropped everything. You know, it's like coming to a full stop. Okay, all right, I'm in. Since then, I've been really happy to join with Clear Mountain Monastery and be a part of this community. I think it was around the same time that I visited the Hermitage that I found out that Clear Mountain Monastery was going to be a thing. It hadn't started yet, and got to come to the first meeting. And it's been really inspiring to see other practitioners looking to a more satisfactory source of happiness. And one of the strongest parts of my practice is the intentional development of mudita. And I appreciate that you guys are inspiration for that. I don't know where this road is going to lead me, but a monk told me once, Ajahn Nisabho told me, he said, skillful intention can only lead to happiness, and unskillful intention can only lead to unhappiness. I questioned that at first, but I'm thinking about it, and I'm gonna hold that as the way I live and practice, because no matter where this road leads me, I want to make sure that I am making all of the choices I'm making with the right intentions. I don't want to practice because I want to look good. I don't want to practice because I think I'll have a rebirth in heaven. I want to practice because it's the only option. It's the only thing that makes sense. Everything else is kind of worthless, to be honest. Yeah. And practice has just brought me, practice has been the only sustainable source of joy I've ever had in my life. Yeah. And that's such a beautiful thing. I'll leave it at that.
Sadhu, 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 anumodam. You won't see Daniel for a while either. He's heading off to Spokane, and then maybe farther afield. I'll try to get his gear. Our first Saturday meeting, we had, I think, 4 people. Daniel was one of them. I think we have another few minutes. What time is it?
It's 10:43.
Okay, one more.
Is this? No?
Hold it.
Hold it.
And release.
Now?
And wait 1 second. And
Good?
Yeah.
Great. I've got an ankle injury, so I have to find a way to sit. But I'm also leaving soon, so I figure now's as good a day as any. Let's see where to start. I think that I credit the start of my story or journey with an ex who had been a practicing Buddhist for a long time and had lived at a Zen center for a couple of years, and I met him a couple of years after that. And I was never a spiritual person, and I grew up in a atheist but culturally Jewish household, so I had exposure to spiritual elements, but it was not really part of my household. And that relationship exposed me to Buddhism, but it became kind of something that I really disliked because I was always frustrated by my ex's use of Buddhism to what to me felt like an unwillingness to be vulnerable. And he would go in and out of meditating really hardcore every day, and then sort of months where he wouldn't, and then he would come back to me and be like, I'm rededicating myself to practice. If I speak to you harshly, tell me I'm being bad. And I didn't know what to do with that because I didn't know what he was talking about. But he planted these sort of, what I didn't know at the time, like jewels of wisdom in my brain that later would come back to serve me. But at the time, I dismissed it. And I was working a very stressful job that I really didn't like, and I was bringing it home a lot, and I was having a lot of anxiety, and he would be like, just don't take it so seriously when you're there. Just don't, it's not personal, just don't let it bother you. And I was like, what are you talking about? How am I supposed to not let it bother me? They're clearly so awful. And I thought it was a really overly simplistic way of seeing things. I didn't think it was honoring my anger or my feelings or my emotions, and I saw him as very emotionally closed, and it just felt very incompatible with how I saw the world. And I tried to meditate with him a few times, but I was like, I just can't sit still that long. My brain just goes too fast. I can't do that. That's not for me. And it never stuck. We moved to Seattle together, and then broke up a few months later, as it goes. And a few months after that, I tried mushrooms for the first time. And I've spoken to a lot of people about like how they got to Buddhism, and it feels like a lot of common threads is either through drugs or through like the deepest suffering they've ever experienced in their life, or a combination of the two. And that was late 2019, and I kind of spent, from that point until late 2020, I discovered that they were a really great tool for my healing process. I would take them intermittently during the pandemic, and I would use them to process emotions and let go of things. And I found myself gradually letting go of things faster and staying more open. But it hadn't led me yet to an actual spiritual path. It just felt like, oh, when the mushrooms need to tell me something, they'll tell me to take them. And that's how it felt. And I would do that, and I would learn something every time. And then I lost my housing because of the pandemic in this weird way. And I sort of decided to go on an open-ended road trip and live out of my Honda Fit, which is not a van. It is a very small hatchback car. And I decided to first go visit my mom in San Francisco for about a month because it was December, January, and I was like, this is the dead of winter. Let me be in a safe house and not in my car. And I needed to finish setting up my car for the trip. And so I went down there, and I was having the worst time ever. On the drive down there, I was experiencing existential depression to a level I never had before. I felt very hopeless and confused about the state of the world, what my role was in it, what I was supposed to be doing, if I was doing enough good, if I was harming by simply existing. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was very sad to leave my friends, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I had a vague map of my trip, but I thought I'd come back to Seattle, but I also wasn't sure, and I was just really not doing okay. So I got to my mom's house, and then within like a week of getting there, I was like, I think I need to do a lot of mushrooms. I think that's like the step I have to take right now. And it was very funny because when I was packing, I had to cull so much stuff and be really particular about what I took. And I only took a few books with me. And one of the ones I chose to take was Be Here Now by Ram Dass, which had been given to me by my high school sweetheart and good friend like 6 years prior, and I had never read it. I just carried it around with me, moved across the country several times and just carried it with me. And I decided on this day that like this was the day I was going to read that book for some reason. And I just sort of sat on my floor and read it for 5 hours and cried. And I had multiple waves of like things coming up for me as it was happening. And one of the things that happened was I understood like faith in God. I had never grasped that concept before. I felt like a deep, truthful understanding that love was kind of the only option for living. And I had these moments of my ex, who I hadn't spoken to in a long time, and these like truth nuggets he had planted for me that had never stuck. And one of them, at sort of the height of this high, was you can't really find spiritual paths through drugs. You can't stay high forever, and it's not sustainable. You have to find another way. And I felt this while I was very high on the drugs. So it was this like weird moment of like, this is amazing, and also like, this isn't gonna work. And so while all of that was happening, I kind of, something clicked while I was reading, and I sort of was like, oh, like Buddhism is literally the only answer for me, and meditation's like the way that I have to approach this going forward. And a lot of other things happened during that sort of trip or realization, but I came out of it with a sense of like unshakable faith and a feeling of truth and a feeling of knowing. And I remember the phrase that kind of was rolling around in my head was meditation is the act of reminding yourself of this, not necessarily the feeling of being high, but this feeling of interconnectedness and love and joy. And I think it was the only thing I managed to write down was meditation is the act of reminding yourself. And again, I was not a good meditator. I had never consistently done it. And somehow the next day I woke up at like 6:30 a.m., never been a morning person either, was very out of character, and just woke up and was like, I'm gonna meditate. And I just started doing that every single day. I would wake up at like 6:30 and I would meditate and I would stretch and I would go on walks. And I set up a morning routine for myself where I would meditate and then read about Buddhism for a couple hours. Particularly from Guo Gu's book that my friend had sent me, which were kind of, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing them right, but gong-ons, like a koan through the Chinese lineage of Chan Buddhism. And that was like this incredible situation. I don't know that I would have been able to do it without having that safe place to be. I didn't have to do anything while I was with my mom. I could just exist and practice. And it was really funny because I had sort of told myself that this road trip I was going to take was jokingly my like eat, pray, love, like I'm going to find myself and everything's going to start to make sense and I'm going to understand like my life path or something. And then it happened like kind of in the first week where I found like the thing I was looking for that was going to ground me. And I went on this road trip and like had to meditate in my car on the side of the highway and in a tent and on my friends' couches and floors and in all of these different places all over the country. And I found that it was so stabilizing and it was so sustainable and it was like the only thing that when I had nothing else going on, like it was there for me. And I came back to Seattle and I got an apartment and I sort of started to figure out what I wanted to do next. And something that had occurred to me back in 2019 was I think I want to go to grad school for counseling, but I wasn't very motivated and I didn't follow through with it. And by mid-2021, I was like, no, I think that is what I need to do, but I think I have to do counseling with a Buddhist like view. I don't think I can just do straight Western psychology anymore. And so in that way, it kind of completely changed the path of my life. I had never considered I would become like really into Buddhism. It was something I would joke about with my ex, like, oh, what if I became like a better practitioner than you? And he was like, that would make me so happy if you became really dedicated to practice. And I was like, that's crazy. And yeah, so I came back, and then I started sort of looking into how to take that path, and I got into grad school, and I'm moving to go to grad school next month to hopefully get to study how to do psychology with a Buddhist lens. And I don't really do mushrooms anymore because I don't really need them. Yeah, so that's kind of the overall gist, but I came back, and I didn't have any community while I was meditating. I was just traveling by myself and doing that, and none of my friends really knew what the hell was going on, and they were like, that's so nice, Sophia, like, cool, and like, we're happy for you. And I was like, you don't understand. It's changed my life. And I would try to sort of like, I started realizing like, oh man, I want to do the thing that my ex did to me, but I know how annoying that was, so I can't do it the way he did it, where I would sort of try to give them these little truth nuggets of like, hey man, have you ever considered just letting that problem go? And they were like, what? And so then I just really learned how to cultivate like compassion, that like the people I really cared and loved about were not necessarily on the same path that I was, or sometimes if I felt frustrated or felt like I was judging them for not being like getting it enough, I just sort of started to cultivate a lot of hey, like I love you for where you are, and I just don't want to see you suffering, and so I'm here to support in whatever way that is, and I'm going to keep talking about what works for me. And you don't have to do it, but like, I'll answer your questions. And I did see people start to get more and more curious about how that worked, and be like, how do you meditate? How do you start meditating? What if I do it wrong? And me being like, I don't know what I'm doing. How do you meditate right? And went through that kind of struggle of, I'm not doing it right, I'm not doing it enough, I keep getting distracted, what? And then talking to my friends who were Buddhists that were like, hey, you gotta just stop worrying about that so much. You're gonna get in your head about it. And realizing that was part of the like thing you have to work through. And yeah, it's been a really interesting process. But so I came back and was like, I need like help. I need to do this with other people. And I think I just sort of Googled like Seattle Buddhist something, and found Clear Mountain when it was still meeting at Volunteer Park in the summer, and went and just kept coming back. And it's been a really grounding piece of practice, especially when I feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm like, at least I'm going to my Saturday meetings, and at least I'm, motivated to do that. And I think something that really shifted for me when I first started meditating was, before, when I had tried to do it, it felt like something I had to force myself to do, which then feels punishing. And when I sort of came to it on my own later, it felt like the only real self-care that was possible. It didn't feel forced, and it didn't feel like punishment. It was like, it's compulsive, I have to, because it makes me sane, or more sane, or semi-sane. And it's been really rooting, and it's been really interesting to see the transformation within myself over the past. It's only been a little over a year of practice, and I feel like I've learned more in this past year than I had in the 5 years of therapy prior, about how I would hold on to my own suffering and the narratives I created for myself, and the ideas I had about, overthinking your problems, that's good, you want to find a solution, and sort of being very future oriented, and sort of unwinding all of that, and getting back to just like being alive in the moment and trying to stay there. Yeah, so anyway, this has gotten very rambly, but I've been very grateful for this space, and I've been very sad that I'm leaving. But I'm moving to a place with so many great resources in the Bay Area for Buddhism and for practice, and so I'm excited to get to continue to expand spiritual community, and hopefully I'll be back to visit and maybe pop in on a Saturday sometime. So, yeah.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu,
See Sophia. Good luck.
I was cleaning a shrine in Australia once, and I knocked off a statue and broke off Guan Yin's head. And that evening I did 108 prostrations, just asking for forgiveness, so I think we're on all right terms now. Last 2 days ago, I spoke to someone who was talking about her moment of breakthrough, and it was a line from this Ajahn Amaro talk where he goes through the analogies the Buddha gives for the body as a lump of foam, and feeling as a water droplet, perception as a mirage, sankhara as a banana tree, and consciousness as a magician at a crossroads, and how these things are all fading. And then he says, the Lord Buddha has given you these teachings to release the grip of your fist around these khandhas. When I hear about these moments where people have stepped onto this path or stumbled, like we're all kind of stumbling deeper into it together, I think it's just the most beautiful thing in the world, and the fact that we have people here who understand and can hold each other in this is truly rare. And that goes for those who spoke today in, actually talking, and the silence, which was just as powerful. So please say hello and goodbye to those who are leaving. Give them a group hug if they want one. It's COVID, so be careful if they don't want one. But let's wrap things up today.